Okay, so in this final lesson for Category 1, we're going to review arithmetic and geometric sequences. So for arithmetic sequences, remember they have a common difference, which means you're going to be adding or subtracting a number to get to the next number in that sequence, in that list. For geometric sequences, you are going to be multiplying by a common ratio, okay, so a common number. And remember, if you want to find the difference or the ratio for the arithmetic sequences, you're going to start at the end and you're going to work backwards. For difference, you're going to subtract. For ratio, you're going to divide. And some notations, some things you're going to have to recognize. So here is some notation that represents the previous term, okay? You could see f of n minus 1, or you could see a sub n minus 1. So I want you to know, anytime you see the n minus 1, that whole term is telling you, hey, look at the number before it in the list. If you see f of n, it's just like seeing a sub n, which is telling you the next term. Okay, next term. So next term, previous term, and then remember, if you see a sub a number, it's telling you what number, what position you are in the sequence. So f of 3 equals the third term. Go to the third number in the list. All right, so let's look at the first few examples we've got. We're going to identify terms in each sequence. So they're telling us that the first term is a 3, and they want us to find the next 3. So we're going to find the second, the third, and the fourth terms in this list. Okay, so a sub n is next term. So if I want to find a sub 2, the second term in the list, I have to take the number before it. What's the number before it? 3, and add 2 to that number. So what is 3 plus 2? 5. So the next number in the list is 5. All right, if I want to find the third number in the list, after the equals tells me what to do, it says I'm going to take the previous number, 5, and I'm going to add 2. What's 5 plus 2? 7. So the third number in the list is 7. And now I want to find the fourth number, so I want to find a sub 4. And to find a sub 4, the fourth number in the list, I have to use the number before it, which is 7, and add 2. So I get 9. Okay, and I'm going to put dot, dot, dot to show that we could keep this pattern going. We could keep finding the next number by using the number before it and adding 2 forever and ever. All right, example number 2. So now we're starting at 100, and we want to find the next 3 in the list. And here's how we're going to do it. And now it's saying, hey, if you want to find that next number in the list, the next term, here's what you got to do. You got to take a fourth, and you got to multiply it by the number before it. So that's what we're going to do. So if I want to find the second term in the list, a sub 2, I'm going to take 1/4 and I'm going to multiply it by the number before it. Okay, so if I'm at the second number, what's the number before the second number? 100. All right, so what's 1/4 of 100? So if you're not good at your math skills or multiplying by fractions, take it to your calculator. 1/4, I can't type, 1/4 times 100 is equal to 25. So that tells me that the second number in the sequence, a sub 2, is 25. All right, now I want to find the third number in the list, a sub 3. So I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do 1/4 times. Now if I want to find the next number, I've got to use the number before it, times 25. All right, so what's 1/4 of 25? So I'm going to take 1/4. 1/4 times 25. And that gives me 25/4. So if I want to figure out what that is as a decimal, that is equal to 6.25. I'm going to keep it as a fraction, 25/4. 25/4. All right, so now if I want to find the fourth number in the list, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a sub 4. I'm going to have to take 1/4, and I'm going to have to multiply it by the term before it, which is a sub 3, which is 25/4. So I'm going to do 25/4. All right, so I'm going to take 1/4 times 25/4, and that is 25/16. So my fourth number in the list is 25/16. All right, so now let's look at it using the f of n's, f of n minus 1. So it means the exact same thing. So remember, f of n minus 1, that is the same thing as me saying the previous term. Okay? And f of n is the same thing as me saying a sub n, which means next term. Okay? It's just another way to write it. So I just want you to become familiar with that. All right, so we're going to start with the first number in the list, which is 7, and we want to find the next 3 numbers in the list. All right, so if I want to find f of 2, which is the second term, I'm going to take the previous term and subtract 3. So I'm just going to say 7 minus 3, and that is 4. All right, if I want to find the third number in the list, I'm going to take f of 3. I want to find the third number in the list, which is the next term. I'm going to take the previous term and I'm going to subtract 3. So I'm going to say 4 minus 3. And what is 4 minus 3? 1. So the third number in the list is 1. And if I want to find f of 4, I am going to take if I want to find the fourth number in the list, I'm going to take the third number in the list, which is 1, and I'm going to subtract 3. Well, 1 minus 3 is a negative 2. And then again, we could keep this going, keep this pattern of subtracting 3 every time from our number to get the next number. All right, example number 4. So again, we're seeing this f of n minus 1 instead of our a sub n minus 1 and our a sub n. So we're going to do the same thing. Again, they gave me the first number in the list. They gave me was negative 1. And they want me to find the next 3 numbers in the list. Well, let's see what they're telling me to do by the rule. They are telling me to say, if you want to find the next number in the list, you're going to take the number before it and you're going to multiply by 2. So if I want to find f of 2, I'm going to take the number before the second term, which is negative 1, and I'm going to multiply by 2. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in 2 in parentheses so it doesn't look like a negative 12 if you can't see the dot, and that's going to be negative 2. So the second number in the list is negative 2. If I want to find the third term in the sequence, I'm going to take the term before it, which is the second term, which is negative 2, and I'm going to multiply by 2. So negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. All right, so now if I want to find f of 4, which means I want to find the fourth number in the sequence, fourth term in the sequence, I'm going to take the term before it, which is the third term, which is negative 4, and multiply by 2. And negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. And again, we could keep this pattern going and going and going. All right, so let's review how to write formulas. So we're going to write a formula for the nth term of the sequence. So they tell us that this is arithmetic. So if I look at 2, 8, 14, 20, I need to be able to figure out what is that number that I am adding or subtracting to get to that next number. So how do I go from 2 to 8? How do I go from 8 to 14? How do I go from 14 to 20? And if you can't figure it out, you start at the end and you are going to subtract the number before it. And then that would be 6. And then we're going to start at 14 and we're going to subtract the number before it, which is 8. And 14 minus 8 is also 6. And then we're going to start at 8 and we're going to subtract the number before it, which is 2. And if you take away 2 from 8, you get 6. And if you notice and recognize, all 3 of your numbers are all a positive 6, which means they have a common difference, a common answer to a subtraction problem. So your D is 6. Your common difference is 6. And they want to know the first term. It is 2. All right, so we're going to write a formula. So if I want to get to the next term, a sub n, I'm going to take the number before it, a sub n minus 1, and I'm going to add 6 to that number. Now, if you want to find it in your calculator, what you're going to do is you're going to go to Stat Enter, and you are going to type in your values. Let me see if I can scoot this up so you can see a little bit more. You are going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4, because you're starting to count at 1, and then you're going to type in the actual terms for your sequence. So you're going to type in the numbers 2, 8, 14, and 20, and then we're going to go to Stat. We're going to write over the calc, and from this list, remember, it's a linear because it's an arithmetic, so we've got to pick the right option, and the option for linear is 4. Then we're going to arrow down to calculate, and we're going to get the equation in our calculator. And we're going to get y equals 6x minus 4. And we're going to see a match with the 6 because the d is going to turn into your slope. And then I want to know where this negative 4 is because I don't see a negative 4 in my list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my calculator and I'm going to type in 6x minus 4. I'm going to go to my table. And if you look, the actual first number in the list in your calculator is negative 4, but we ignore that number because we don't start counting at 0. So there's two different ways. You can just add or subtract your common difference, but if you want to use your calculator, you've got to remember that this number is the number that is not really the first term in your sequence. All right, so let's look at example 2. All right, so I've got a sequence 30, 15, 7 and a half, 3 and 3/4. So they're telling me that this is geometric. So again, if I want to find my common ratio, and I can't tell it by looking at the list, I'm going to start at the end, and I'm going to divide by the number before it. And we're going to go ahead and make this a fraction if we don't get an answer. So we're going to take 3.75, and we're going to divide by 7.5. And that is 0.5, which I know is the same as 1/2. All right, and now I'm going to start at 7.5, and I'm going to divide the number in front of it, which is 15. All right, so let's do this. 7.5 divided by 15. And that is, again, 1/2. So I'm going to check the last one because it's got to be the same ratio all the way through. So I'm going to say 15 divided by 30, which is the number before it. So I'm going to do 15 divided by 30, and that is 1/2. So again, you can see when we took the ratio or divided starting at the end, we ended up with a common ratio of 1/2. And a sub 1 is the first term in the sequence, so the first number is 30. So if I wanted to write a formula, I could say, okay, if I want to get to the next term, I can take the term before it, a sub n minus 1, and we would be multiplying by 1/2. If I wanted to use my calculator, it's going to look a little different. So I'm going to go to stat enter. Actually, I'm going to clear my memory first. I'm going to go to stat enter, and I'm going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4, because that's how many terms I have when I count them. And the first term is 30, and then 15, and then 7.5, and then 3 7/4. And I'm going to do stat. I'm going to arrow over to calc, but instead of picking 4, because this is not a linear, geometric sequences are exponential. So I want to hit 0, and I want to arrow down to calculate and hit enter. And my equation in my calculator is going to be y equals 60 times 1/2 to the x power, because remember it's exponential, so I've got to type into my a and b. So I'm going to go to my calculator, I'm going to type in 60 times 1/2 to the power of x. I'm going to go to my table because remember 60 wasn't in my list, but it shows up when I use my calculator to get the equation, and that's just because the calculator starts counting at 0, but we do not. Our first term is actually 30. All right, so let's look at literal equations. This is just a way to rearrange your equation to get it to a certain letter. So look here, we've got a is equal to 1/2 times base times height, and we want to solve for b. So when it says solve for, that means you're just rearranging your equation to get that letter by itself. So I want to make this, instead of a equals for area, I want to rearrange it to make it b equals. So let's look at the operations. So what's going on over here with the b? Well, it looks like we're multiplying it by h, and then we're multiplying by 1/2, which is the same as dividing by 2. So we want to take care of that division first. So what's the opposite of division? It would be multiplication. So what we're going to do is we are going to multiply both sides by 2. And the reason why we're doing that is because 1/2 times 2 is 1. And that's what I want to get. I want to turn this 1/2 into a 1 or a 0. And it can't be a 0 because then I wouldn't have anything after the equal sign. So I want to turn it into a 1 because multiplying something by 1 doesn't change it. So we're going to take a equals 1/2 times the base times the height, and I'm going to show multiplying by everything by 2, and I'm just going to put a 2 in parentheses. Now remember, I can multiply 1/2 by 2 in my calculator. I just did that and I got 1, so I really have 1 times base times height. And over here I've got 2 times a, which is just going to turn into 2a. So I've got 2a equals base times height. And now I want to get b alone. So it's connected through to the h by multiplication. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I want to divide by h. And a number divided by itself is going to turn into a 1. So that's going to be 1 times b, or just b. And then I can't do any division over here because I don't know the value of a or h. So when I rearrange this, the base is going to equal to 2 times the area, all divided by the h. All right, and now we want to take this one. We've got 3 times the value of x minus 2 times the value of y plus 3 is equal to 0. Solve for y. So if you look at this, this is just making it y equals. So the first thing I want to do is I want to move all my terms to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. And then I'm also going to move the 3. Well, the opposite of adding 3 is subtracting 3. So I'm going to subtract 3. And it's not going to be a like term with the negative 3x. So I'm just going to put it afterwards. So I'll just clean all this up because remember we're going to keep our equal sign right in the middle. So I've got negative 2y equals, and then I can't combine like terms because a negative 3x and a negative 3 are not like terms. So it's going to be negative 3x minus 3. And then I want to get this to 1y equals, that's what it means. It says solve for 1y. Well, I have a negative 2. So how can I turn that negative 2 into a positive 1? And the answer is easy. I'm going to divide it by itself. And if I divide this side by negative 2, I have to divide everything on the other side by negative 2. So I'm going to do this. Negative 2, negative 2. And now negative 2 divided by itself is 1y, or just y equals. And now I'm going to go to my calculator and I'm going to type in, I'm going to leave it as a fraction. Negative 3 divided by negative 2 is going to turn into 3 halves. So I have 3 halves x. And then I have the same thing. I have a negative 3 divided by negative 2, which I know is going to turn into a positive 3 halves. So now I have rearranged and solved this equation for y. I have rearranged and solved this equation for b.